Hey everybody, this is Danny Martin. I am here at my shop called High Cotton Decor, and we are located in Bryant, Arkansas, which is just outside of Little Rock. And I'm hoping that we get through this live without losing power, because we've got some really bad storms coming through and we've already lost power once today. So hopefully it won't happen again. But I am super excited to share with you guys how to prep and paint a vintage piece of furniture. And I'm hoping I am doing this correctly. So if somebody is watching, if you can just confirm for me that everything is working and we're in the right place and everything, that would be great. So I had to put my glasses on because otherwise I can't see very good. So, all right, so I'm gonna show you guys how the steps that I go through when I am prepping and painting, especially a vintage piece, which is primarily what I do. I primarily, oh, thank you. Thanks, Sherry. Great. Yay, it's working. I primarily refinish vintage pieces. That's what I really love to do. In fact, I went today and looked at a piece to buy, but it was not vintage, so I passed on it, because that's really I really love working with vintage pieces and giving them a second life. So the piece that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today is this vintage vanity, and I've already taken the mirror off, but I'm going to walk you through the steps and share with you some of my best tips that I use. And this is just what I have learned works for me. I know everybody kind of does things. Hi, Amy. Everybody kind of does things a little differently. But I'm just going to share with you guys what I've been painting furniture for about 10 years. And I've used lots of different paint products, and Rethunk Junk is my absolute favorite. And I'll share with you some of the reasons why I love it so much. So before I get started, I'm going to walk you through kind of what I've already done with this piece. So you can see all of this up here. I've already put some wood filler in because this piece had some scratches and some pretty deep nicks. And I was hoping that I would get to sand this today so you could see what it looked like after I had sanded it. But because of all the storms, I didn't get a chance to do that, because it's just been pouring. Like we're about ready to build the ark out here. Just to be clear, you do not have to sand your furniture before painting it with Rethunk Junk. The only reason I'm gonna sand this is because, first of all, because I put the wood filler on, but then also because I'm actually gonna take this finish off the top and do a wash effect on the top. And so I don't want this old dark finish. But unless you need to refill or to fill scratches or nicks, or unless you want to take off the finish because you're going to do something like a wash, you do not need to sand or prime your furniture before painting it with Rethunk Junk. You just need to clean it really well with the prep spray. So that's what I'm going to share you guys first. So I'm going to be using the drawers on this piece to walk you guys through the steps. So this one I'm going to share you. I have it labeled so I didn't forget what I was going to do. So I'm going to take the hardware off, and a lot of times I'll have my drill to take hardware off, especially if I'm doing a big piece with a lot of hardware. But I'm not going to use that today for a number of reasons. Number one, I don't have a bunch of hardware to take off. But number two, this is a pretty old piece. I think it's from the 1940s based on the style and the condition. And I don't want to, first of all, I don't want to damage the wood. And secondly, on old pieces, it's not unusual for your screws to be kind of stripped. And that's why I usually always do a test first with a hand screwdriver. To make sure that the screws have not been stripped out before trying to use my drill. So this piece, the inside of the drawers where the screws go to hold the hardware on, I'll show you in a second. Around the screws, they are a little, the wood is split a little bit, and it's just because it's old. So right here you can see how the wood is just, has split just because they're old and they're dry. The wood is dry, and it's just gotten damaged over time. So first thing, take all the hardware off. Now what I like to do, because probably 90% of the time I reuse my hardware for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't like throwing things away that can be reused. It's not great for the environment. And number two, actually for three reasons. Number two, I don't like filling in holes and then having to sand them. I just don't, I just prefer to use the original hardware in the original holes. If I don't use the original hardware, I try to find hardware that fits the original holes, because I really don't like filling in holes and drilling new ones, especially in old pieces. And the third reason is because most of the time I really like the look of the old hardware. I think it goes with the piece. So when I take the hardware out, I always put the screws in so we don't have any random screws floating around where they can get lost. And then, like while I'm working on the drawer, I just put it in here. I like to try to keep the hardware with the original drawer or door or whatever that it was on, so that I know that that hardware fits those holes. That might be a little bit overkill, but that's just what I like to do. All right, so I'm going to show you how to clean this with the prep spray. So I'm gonna move the camera up here. And if you guys have any questions, please just pop them in the comments. All right, so the prep spray, this is, I think, definitely one of the most critical steps to make sure that you end up with a really nice piece that is going to last a long time and a finish that you're gonna be really happy with. Let me get closer so you guys can see better. There we go. We have been selling Rethunk Junk here in our store for several years. And what I always tell customers when they ask me, do I absolutely have to clean with the prep spray? What I always tell them is, in almost 4 years, we've only had one customer complaint about the paint, and that customer unfortunately did not use the prep spray. So we always want to clean with the prep spray first. And for this piece, I'm gonna use a scrubby pad, and you can tell the scrubby pad has been used. I used, excuse me, I used it on some of the other drawers. And I'll show you why. So this piece has been, again, it's pretty old. It has probably had lots of furniture polish, furniture cleaner, various products used on it over the years. And if you guys can see this little kind of, it looks like a little bit of a gray residue that's coming off. Can you guys see that? Yep, you can see it right there. That is the prep spray and the scrubby getting all that stuff off. You can see I've used this rag quite a bit too. So on these older pieces, I usually clean with the prep spray a couple of times because there's usually quite a bit of that buildup. And I like to let it sit for just a little bit, and you guys will see why in a moment. So I don't know if it's showing up on camera yet, but I can see it here where I can see where the prep spray is starting to break down whatever the dirt. It's probably just dirt and grease. I mean, look at that, you guys. I'm just using my finger and it's getting it off. The dirt and the grease from lots of hands, you know, pulling and opening it over the years, and cleaners and all of that. So can you guys see that? That's just with my finger rubbing it off. So this is why It's so important to clean your piece with the prep spray because that's going to give you a nice clean surface to work with. It's gonna help your paint stick. It's gonna give you a smoother finish and just help your piece last for a long time. And hopefully you won't have to like do any touch-ups or anything because you cleaned it so good. I'm gonna try and find a clean spot on my rag so I can show you guys what this looks like. So there's what the rag looks like before. So you can see it's getting lots of stuff off. So I'm gonna give this 1 or 2 more passes. Also, I will tell you, I probably use more prep spray than what the folks at Rethunk Junk recommend. And again, that's just because I really like my pieces to be nice and clean. Most of my pieces I am reselling here in our store. And it's really important to me that my customers don't have any problems when they get their piece home, that it lasts and that they're happy with it for a long time. So I probably go a little overboard with the cleaning and everything. So since I've done several of the drawers, and in fact I did a whole the dresser that matches this piece, which I'll show you guys in a moment, I know that it takes about 3 times of cleaning. And I'm getting a lot less of that waxy stuff coming up now. It's a lot cleaner. And every piece that you clean is gonna be different. I just finished a newer piece. I just finished a newer piece last week. And it was, it's a Queen Anne piece, probably from the 1980s, late 80s maybe. And it definitely did not need to be cleaned this many times because it just didn't have so much stuff built up on it. So on that one, I really just, I cleaned the whole thing once and then I went back and I did the drawer fronts a second time because typically on dressers, pieces with drawers, your drawers are gonna be where you're gonna get the most grease and grime and stuff built up because that's what gets touched the most when the piece is used. So that is how you prep. This is now ready to paint. So let me get my second drawer. I already have this one prepped. So I cleaned this one earlier. And let me see if I can show you guys the difference. So you can see. So this one on the top has been cleaned with the prep spray. You can see it has a little bit less shine. So one of the things I always tell my customers is that the prep is great because it cleans it and it gets it ready for the paint. It takes a little bit of that shine off, so it helps the paint stick better, as opposed to the one I haven't cleaned with the prep. You can really see the difference. All right, let me put this one back. Another tip I'll share with you guys is that when I'm doing drawers, I always number them. So I just use like a piece of painter's tape and I put a number in the drawer and then I put the corresponding number in the slot so that I'm putting the right drawer back in the right place. Again, I just do that because sometimes on these older vintage pieces, the drawers and stuff can be a little wonky. And even though they look like the same size drawer, it may fit one slot better than another. And I just like everything to be back in its original place because I know it works there. So you're not gonna have to do this next step on all of your pieces, but just in case you guys are wondering, I'm gonna show you. This has some veneer that has chipped off right here and down here. And when that happens, you can do a couple of things. One, you can fill it with wood filler, which is what I'm gonna do. Or if it's a solid wood piece, which this is, you can peel the veneer off. Sometimes that may be a little bit more work. So just kind of figure out what you wanna do, but I'm just gonna show you guys. I'm gonna just Put a little bit of wood filler on. And I like to just kind of use my fingers to smush it down in there. You always want to fill beyond the space that you're filling and higher, because you're going to sand it down. So you always want it to go beyond the spot that needs it, and you want it to be higher than the rest of your piece so that you can sand it down. And then I'm just going to put a little bit up here in this little spot. And again, you do not need to sand your piece before painting unless you're doing something like putting wood filler in, or you're taking the old finish off because you want to do some type of, decorative finish. And then you're just gonna let this dry. This wood filler that I use, which I think is Minwax, it says that it starts out pink and turns brown. Mine is all brown, so I guess it has been exposed to the air too much. But this is one of my favorite wood fillers. There's a couple different ones that I use, but I like this one. And it does take a little bit to get dry. You want to make sure it's fully dry, because you don't want to start sanding it and then get down to wood filler that hasn't dried, because then you're going to end up with a bumpy surface, a bumpy finish. So this is probably going to take a couple hours to dry, because I did put, I've got quite a bit on there, and I want to make sure it's dry all the way through. And usually this starts pink and then turns brown, and that's how you know it's dry, but for some reason mine is all brown. Okay, so once you've cleaned it, if you've got holes to fill, you've done that, you've sanded your holes that you filled, any of that stuff, then you're ready to paint. So this I have cleaned, as I said earlier, I cleaned this earlier. Do I prep the sides of the drawers and inside the drawers if you're going to paint them? Yes. I am not painting the inside of this. I'm not painting the tops either. I'm leaving the tops this finish. So I did not, I wiped them down just to get them clean, but I didn't really prep them. I did not prep the insides of the drawers. If I was painting these, this doesn't have a varnish on it or anything. So I would probably just do a really quick job prepping, because usually with raw wood, you're not gonna need to clean with the prep spray. And this is pretty close to raw wood because it doesn't have a varnish or a finish on it. But yes, I would, because if nothing else, it's got dust and everything on it, and I want all of that clean. So I am using a color that I mixed, and I call it Bashful Flamingo. It is a mixture of Bashful Blush and Flamingo, which I have here. And this is what the color looks like. So I'm just using an old Rubbermaid container to keep the paint fresh. And I've done a couple of rounds of this mixture because I have a dresser that I'm painting, and I've already painted a couple coats on it. And I like to use the same container because then I can get real close to the color that I mixed before. But this is probably about I don't know, 4 to 5 parts Bashful Blush, which is this color, really pretty, nice pale pink. About 4 or 5 parts Bashful Blush to 1 part Flamingo, and I'm just gonna mix up a little bit more so you guys can see the mixing process. One of the things I always tell my customers is, I always recommend pouring your paint into a separate container, even if you're not mixing, so that your paint in your container stays nice and fresh. You don't want to have this container off for, 30, or the lid off for 30 or 40 minutes while you're painting, because then your paint in your container is going to start to dry And we want to keep this nice and fresh so we can use it for other projects. And then I always try to wipe around the edge of my container before I put the lid back on, because that paint will cause that lid to seal. So a couple of tips when you're mixing. Usually you start with your lighter color and add your darker color to it, because it's going to take less of your darker color to have an effect than if you start with dark and are adding light. I hope that makes sense the way I said it. So you can see I didn't put very much flamingo in. Like I said, I would say it's probably maybe 5 parts Bashful Blush to 1 part flamingo maybe. And any of the Rethunk Junk colors can be mixed together. They all are perfectly safe for mixing. And so you just can mix until you get the color that you like. And if you don't want to mix a whole bunch, you can do like just some sample mixtures on, you know, like a paper plate or something like that, until you find a combination that you like, and then use, you know, some type of container to mix up more for your piece. I always recommend too, which I did not follow my own advice this time. Sometimes I don't follow my own advice. If you're gonna be doing, you know, a larger piece of furniture with a mixture, you wanna, you know, make up a little bit more than you think you're gonna need, because it's kind of a bummer to run out of your mixed color and then have to try to recreate it. This one isn't too hard to recreate because it's not really, I'm not putting a whole lot of the flamingo. I'm just using a little bit because I'm just darkening it a tiny little bit. But on some custom colors, you know, it's a little bit more precise, and it might kind of be a bummer to have to try to recreate that. Okay, so I'm ready to start painting. So the first coat is always going to look the worst. That's one of the things I tell people a lot is you're going to feel like you made a terrible mistake when you get your first coat in, or your first coat on, because it's not going to look pretty. It's going to look streaky. That's totally normal. It doesn't start really looking pretty, you guys, until like the second coat. So don't worry if when you're done painting your first coat, you step back and you're like, oh my gosh, horrible mistake. Just keep painting. So when I'm doing drawers like this that have these holes for the handles, I like to paint all around them and then in the middle like that. And the reason for that is I want to go really lightly over those holes, and I'll show you why. Because if you go real heavy, you end up with paint in the hardware holes, which, I mean, isn't a big deal, but it's just kind of a pain, because then you got to clean it out, which a screwdriver is very helpful for doing that. And the reason you don't want all that paint in there is a couple of reasons. Number one, it's going to dry, and we all know how durable Rethunk Junk is. It's going to make it really hard for you to get your hardware in if you've got a bunch of paint kind of glopped up in there. And number two is, if you are, when you're done painting and you're letting it dry, if you set it down or you're painting it and it's still sitting in the piece, so it's up and down, it's not standing up like this, gravity is gonna pull all that extra paint out, and it's really easy to end up with drips if you're not paying attention. So I always try to get any extra paint that's in those holes out before I move on to the next drawer, because I don't want any drips showing. And then since I'm not painting the top here, I like to take a paper towel with just a little bit of prep on it. and I just wipe off any extra paint that I got there on the top. And that one is ready to dry. So there's your first coat. Like I said, it does not look pretty at all. So we're gonna let that dry. And I'm gonna show you guys, I'm gonna share some tips with you for painting your second and third coat. So this one, I already painted the first coat. I painted this about 45 minutes ago. It's dry to the touch. One thing to keep in mind is that dry time and cure time with paint are two different things. So once your paint is dry to the touch, you can go ahead and start painting your next coat on. But pretty much all paint, you guys, this is not just unique to Rethunk Junk, but it's pretty standard across the paint industry, is that most paints are going to take, pretty much all paints, are going to take 30 days to fully cure. So the difference is dry time just means it's dry to the touch. You can go ahead and put your next coat on. You can even use your piece, but you just want to use it gently for about that first 30 days because it does take about 30 days to fully cure. And that's true of like wall paint that you buy at Sherwin-Williams. If you read anything, it's going to tell you, a lot of times they'll actually say, don't put anything on your walls for 30 days after painting, which, I mean, who's going to do that? So just keep in mind dry time versus cure time. Now, that does not mean you can't use your piece for 30 days. It just means you want to just, treat it a little gently while that paint is fully curing. So the second coat, I usually put my second coat on a little bit thicker than my first coat. I like to think of it as my first coat is my foundation. It's what I'm giving the additional coats, the foundation for the additional coats to stick to. And then the second coat, and if you need a third coat, which you can tell this piece is going to need a third coat because it's so dark, the second and third coat is more for coverage and looks. That's kind of how I think about it in my head. So a couple of suggestions for your second and your third coat, because one of the things that I know people get concerned about is they don't want brush strokes, which is understandable. I don't want brush strokes either. So I like to keep, and I should have showed you guys this before I painted it, but I like to keep a water bottle. This is the water bottle that I use. It's a misting bottle. It just gives you a really fine mist. And a lot of times I'll just mist my piece. You can spray directly into your paint. You can spray your brush. But usually on my second and third coat, I'll just do a light mist of water. And that just helps the paint. The paint self-levels beautifully, but the water just helps it self-level and smooth out a little bit, I think, a little bit better. And then you guys can see that after I've put on my paint, I like to go back and just do a full stroke from side to side, just to give it that nice, uniform finish. And then once this is dry, I can go ahead and do the third coat. So I'll show you guys that on this other piece that I've got over here. So this is the matching dresser that goes with my vanity. So this I've done, I think this may have 3 coats on it. I don't remember, you guys. I've kind of, menopause brain. If you're wondering why this drawer looks different than the others, it's because this drawer, the veneer was peeling off really badly. So I just went ahead and took it all off and then did a really quick sand to get all of the dried glue off. So this piece, the wood behind the veneer was much lighter than the rest. And so this one just needed 2 coats of paint. The rest of the piece is probably gonna need 3. And that's just possibly even 4 in some spots. And that's totally normal, you guys, when you're going from dark to light. It's not unusual to need an extra coat or 2 if you're going for full coverage. So let me show you. I'm just gonna take my water bottle, mist it, and go ahead and paint it. And again, this is what I like to do to get a really nice smooth finish. You can also just keep a cup of water. Just make sure you don't drink it by accident. And just dip your brush in that cup of water every so often. You just want to have a little bit of water to help keep the paint nice and smooth. And then I'm just gonna go real lightly over the holes because again, I don't want a bunch of paint collecting there to cause drips. And then I'll do the full side to side. And even though I didn't have a ton of paint on my brush, I can see that I'm getting a little bit of paint collecting right there. So you just want to keep your eye on the hardware holes when you're painting dressers, because that's usually where I see drips showing up. So you just want to make sure to go back and smooth those out because we don't want those drips to dry. And that's one of my tips for just getting a nice smooth surface. So once I am done with both of these pieces, I will seal them with the top coat, the tough top. I'll also tell you guys, one of the reasons why I love Rethunk Junk the most out of all of the paints that I've used is, just need a little bit extra there. I tend to be a little bit of an overbrusher, as you can tell. I always tell my customers, don't overbrush, which is what I do. And I have found Rethunk Junk to be the most forgiving of overbrushing. So if you're an overbrusher like me, let me know if you have had that same experience. Because I've used a lot of other paints and just did not get a good result. And I know it's because I tend to overbrush. So I just like to go along the bottom and again, just wipe up any extra paint. And do the same on the top. You can paint the tops of your drawers if you want. I just chose that I didn't want to on this piece. And this is where some of this paint has already dried from yesterday when I was working on this. And a little bit of prep spray, and that'll come off. As long as you catch it before it fully cures. All right, you guys, so there is some tips. I hope that this has been helpful. My plan for these pieces, like I said, is to finish painting them. I have to really finish painting that vanity. There's a lot to do there. On the top here, I did a wash, which if you want to see how I did that, I did a live video over on my Facebook page, which is High Cotton Decor LR. LR stands for Little Rock. And I walk you through how to do a wash like this. And I think I may do some transfers or some stencils or something on the front. If you guys are interested in seeing that, let me know. But I hope this has been helpful. If you have not tried Rethunk Junk yet and you're thinking about it, you can go to the Rethunk Junk website, click on Find a Retailer, and it will tell you if there's anybody selling the paint in your area. If not, you can always order it from the Rethunk Junk website, but let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm gonna keep working on these pieces, and I will share pictures of them with you guys when I'm done. I may do a video, if you guys are interested, let me know. I may do a video of applying some transfers or stencils, if that's something that you guys are used to, or not used to, if that's something you guys are interested in. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this has been helpful. Have a great day.